Alrighty, so I've gotten a couple of comments over the past couple of weeks about how do I get my combat class so high, so I wanted to do sort of like a combat class guide and just talk about the different factors and stuff that you kind of have to work on and what kind of goes into your combat class, of course, because it's not necessarily just one thing that you can do, of course, it's kind of like a broad scale, many different things sort of feed into your combat class numbers. So like if I go over to my PvP team, for example, in geared PvP, it takes into account obviously like your character's levels, your just character stats overall. In geared PvP, you do have to worry about your gear actually contributing to your stats, which is a really big factor as well. There's just a lot of different things to go into. So I mean, this is a very, very high combat class team in general, so 371 is kind of insane, and that's without CC food. But if I do throw on CC food, out of curiosity, I hit roughly 415. Yeah, it's been a while since I've looked at that. That is an egregious number. But this is kind of inflated a little bit. This isn't typically what I would actually use. Normally, for Meliodas and for Bon, I would use an attack crit damage set because in PvP, they just need to do a lot more damage and everything. Diane is kind of my tank in this scenario. Team building is a completely different thing, though. So this is obviously a bit inflated. This is just like what I could get it up to if I was just trying to go for pure combat class, which isn't necessarily always what you need to go for. So I wanted to go over a couple of the factors and everything like that that you wanted to sort of look at to increase your combat class first, and then we can talk about sort of the team side of things a little bit as well. So the biggest thing is down here in the account buff sort of button. You can click that, and one of the big things that you'll sort of work on over time is your account combat class. This is actually going to give you an account-wide buff that does give you stats, which is a little bit pay to win, of course, but sort of as you pull new characters, work on those characters, level them up, build them gear, all of those things will sort of get taken into consideration, and it will increase your overall combat class because it's taking into account every character in your box. As you reach different milestones and stuff, you're going to increase your HP basically for quite a while up until you get to 4.5 million. Then you start to get a little bit of defense. Once you reach the 13 million mark, if I'm not mistaken, once you reach, no, it's actually even before that. Once you reach the 12 million mark, you actually stop getting HP. 15% is kind of where it caps out at, and it starts to move more into defense. Once you reach 13 million, you start to get your first couple, you get your first percent into attack, which, if you don't know, HP is the best contributing factor when it comes to combat class. HP is what gives you the most combat class, so a lot of the times whenever you're running support characters and stuff like that, where you just want to go first as much as possible, HP defense is what people typically gravitate towards. So as you sort of rank up your box and get different combat class buffs and stuff like that, you're going to gain more and more stats. So that is definitely a huge factor. The Constellation system that we have down here is also another big factor that will sort of just come with time, because as you sort of work on your characters and you pull new characters and stuff, you're going to get GP, which is growth points, and those are what you're actually going to use inside the constellations themselves to buy these orbs, and each of these orbs is going to give you stats. The big orbs are typically one of the base stats, so the green ones are for HP, the red ones are for attack, and the blue ones are for defense, whereas these smaller ones are going to be substats. So this one's resistance, for example, this one is crit chance, and then as you sort of go through and get them all, you gain stats. So my overall 7 constellations right now is giving me 21,606 HP, which is pretty outrageous. That's a lot of extra HP just from this alone. But the biggest parts of it are from when you actually complete a constellation itself. So as you complete these, you basically gain a big buff that unlocks. So you can see Constellation Completion Reward. I gained 700 HP and 120 defense just for finishing Greed. The biggest one, obviously, so far, I don't think anyone has been able to complete Pride yet. It's just way too big. Like, this thing is huge. There's going to be a lot more characters that need to come out before people are going to be able to complete this thing. But looking at Gluttony, this was by far the biggest increase. I got 6,000 HP, 480 defense, 400 attack. I think this one increased my combat class, like my actual team CCs, by like anywhere from like 3,000 to 5,000 CC, which was quite a big boost just on its own. So as you sort of pull new characters, work on characters, limit breaking, super awakening, everything sort of contributes to it. Buying new costumes and stuff for the characters, all of that gives you GP, and then you can use that to sort of go through, buy the stones, increase these, finish them up. gain extra CC. Once you reach a certain amount of them done, once you finish Sloth, you actually unlock Chaos Constellation for Lust, which is the very first one. So you can basically just use these little Chaos Crystals that you gain every week. They reset. You can use these to sort of re-roll the stats on all of these, and it re-rolls all 5 of them at one time. So, like, if I do the attack one, it rolls all 5 of these, which is very unfortunate because I just recently got Chaos Fragments for the first time, and I was hoping that I'd be able to reset or, like, re-roll individual ones. It does not apparently work like that. These, you get 10 of these, it just re-rolls the whole thing like it would if you were using 1 of these. So, not a fan of that, but it is what it is. As you sort of progress further and further, there's just more stats that sort of come out of it. It's pay to win. It's unfortunate, but it is pay to win. So, box CC, Constellations, those are a really, really big factor, but they're very slow. You get those over time. You're sort of going to just work on those as you work on your characters. Obviously, working on your characters is a big part of it, but the biggest thing I would say that you can actually do in your day-to-day gameplay or just like over like the course of a week or two is make sure that you're farming gold so that way you can actually build gear for your characters. It doesn't have to be extravagant gear. Like obviously, you know, for characters that I've been using for a long time, I have UR gear for those characters. I have an HP defense set here. I typically run an attack crit set on this Meliodas, so I'll use attack crit set. You know, the gear is going to be a very big contributing factor to their CC. You can see I have 70,000 on attack crit. If I change them over to HP defense, I'm going to have 74,000, almost 75. So it's quite a big difference in the stats that it makes. This is an LR character, so he has really high stats, which does contribute a lot to his combat class, of course. But just gear, for example, is a really big factor. So if I go to equipment in the search section, you can see that every single character in my box has HP defense on, and if they don't, it's because they have an attack crit set on that's normally UR geared for them, or if it's a character that specifically needs something specific other than HP defense. For example, like this Melascula actually gains stats for her whole team based on her lifesteal. So typically build her with lifesteal pieces on, which is, you know, it's a bit niche. Some characters are like that. There's a Valenti that uses crit defense. There's a couple of small characters that sort of do weird things. This is the crit defense one, but HP defense is what you're going to want to put on all of your characters that you're basically just not using. A ton of these characters are just, unfortunately, useless. They might get LRs at one point sometime in the future, but who knows? They do LRs pretty slow at the moment. It's roughly like 1 LR character every 2 months right now. So the odds of all of these characters getting LR are slim to none. Like, they're just going to pick specific ones that they want to do, of course, and maybe the ones that maybe will garner the most hype. But every single one of these characters is not going to get the love that they deserve, unfortunately. But if there's characters that are just sitting around in your box, I recommend you just, click on them. For example, this Red Shin, I doubt I have UR gear for him. He has an HP defense set on. That is rare pieces. You want to go for rare pieces at the maybe the max. You can obviously build SSR gear for everybody if you really want to, but that is going to take a ton more time, and SSR gear and SR gear both re-roll with anvils, which is a really big factor. The reason why you put R gear on people is because this is the highest rarity that you can actually re-roll with gold. So that is a big thing. Anvils are just like too expensive, kind of. Like, there's not a really good way to just get a ton of anvils all at one time. So you really want to just, if there's characters in your box that you don't have UR gear for, you're just trying to gain box CC, put an HP defense set on them with rare gear. You could, if you're really, really early in the game, I guess you could technically go with like C gear, like common gear or uncommon gear. But for continuity's sake and just for getting the most bang for my buck, I typically go for rare gear just because it's the highest rarity that I can go without spending ridiculous resources. So it's going to take a lot of time. I typically re-roll my gear for, you want to go for the base stat because it's going to give you the most stats. HP, like I said, is the biggest contributing factor. I typically re-roll this kind of gear for 2%, but I know when you're starting out, you might not have that much gold. You might just want to go 1%. You might just want to make sure that each piece has HP substats on it, and you're not getting like crit resistance or just random stuff that's not going to contribute as much stats. Maybe re-roll the substat or the main stat, your base stat, every once in a while, just to make sure that it's somewhat high-ish. It doesn't have to be the perfect gear. All of this gear is very weird. Some of these are 13%. I'm sure some of these are even worse. Here's a 13%. Here's a 12%. And these are kind of on the better end. During festivals, though, they do typically give out these boxes sometimes. They're not every single festival. The one that that we're in right now is the Queen Elizabeth Festival as of the time of me recording this, and they actually give out these SR gear boxes that actually have completely maxed out base stat and substat rolls in an HP defense format, which is fantastic. You want to make sure that when you're building gear and stuff like that, that you try to go for the ones that you need. The biggest thing is HP, for example, is a 4 set, so you want to have 4 pieces of HP to make sure that you can gain this buff right here, which is a 20% HP increase, which is why you're running HP in the first place. This is just going to be a big boost. It's going to give you a good amount of stats and everything. You can technically, like I could, sometimes when I was, first starting out, I would put like the whole right side as HP, and then I'd put the top left as defense, and then the bottom left as defense or something like that, with the 4th HP in the middle. I don't recommend doing that. I really recommend you try to find a method that you like, a format that you like. This is the one that I typically prefer, and it seems like the game even gives you sets in this format in general, where the sets that don't take 4 pieces, defense pieces, take 2 pieces to actually make the set buff, which I try to put those in the middle. If I'm not using HP defense on a character, you can put attack defense, but most of the time for damage dealers nowadays, people will do attack pieces on the top and bottom, and then they'll put crit damage pieces on the middle slots, because those are also pieces that take 2 for a set, and they're going to give you crit, which crit obviously is going to help you do more damage. If they're an attacker, like a DPS unit, you're more than likely going to want to get as much attack out of them as possible, like damage-wise. So try to make sure that you're putting the pieces in the same slot. So if I was going to build, for example, if I go to Meliodas up here at the top, for example, my HP defense set, the defense pieces are in the middle. If I wanted to throw the attack crit damage set on him, the crit damage pieces are in the middle. And the reason, because every once in a while, for some specific content, I might need to swap the pieces in the middle out for something. Like if I wanted to throw defense in here so he could be a little bit tankier, or if I wanted to throw crit resistance gear in here for, to make sure that he's not getting crit as much, or crit defense gear so he's not taking as much damage from crits. I try to build all of my gear the same. If it's going to be a 2-piece set, it's going to be in the middle pieces. That way I can swap it out on every character if possible. There are really old characters that I have that don't use that kind of format, unfortunately. I'm sure maybe like a Deanne or something probably has like a weird and wacky set, if I had to guess. Where's my stuff at? Okay, here's an attack crit. Here's an HP defense. I don't think she actually has a set like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm sure there's a character that I have. Actually, I think Escanor is a good example. If I find Escanor in here, I hate that he's not with the 7 Deadly Sins. So if I go to Escanor, I have an HP defense set, or here's the attack crit set. You can see that my crit pieces are on the bottom right and the middle right. That means that any of my modern sets that I wanted to swap pieces out for don't work as well, and I have to go way out of my way to worry about swapping specific pieces out. And when you're first starting out, it's hard to make luxury, like extra sets for every single character in your box. So if I wanted to put these defense pieces on, I technically do have them the same for this HP defense set, but because this is my most modern set, they're actually in the middle, so they won't line up with the other pieces from my older sets. So if you understand what I'm trying to say here, is try to do them all in the same format, so that way you can swap pieces out as you need them, and you won't be stuck in a weird, awkward situation where you need to either rework the whole gear set, or you need to make them a new gear set, whatever the case may be, because it's just wasting resources in the end, and that's not good. So like I said, just build HP defense sets for every character that you're not using in the box. That's going to be a big way to just gain lots of CC. You can do it kind of sort of fast. I would say that this is probably the fastest way to gain box CC. Obviously, depending on your resources, you're going to have to use a lot of gold, and it's going to take a lot of just resources and stuff to build up these sets in general. To max out rare gear, you're actually going to need... Or, well, I didn't mean to do that, actually, but if I go to consecutive enhance, the awakening tiers, you're going to need these 3-star awakening stones, and you're either going to have to get those through Gear Gacha, which is the like you go to the shop, you go to the equipment draw. This is going to take gold or keys in your inventory to roll for gear. I typically don't keep anything below SSR at this point, but you could basically just re-roll with gold. It'll just re-roll for however long you want it to. You can set a limit for it or whatever. It'll give you a ton of just like materials and everything. You can use King in your tavern to exchange gear or like exchange the stones for higher tier or smaller tier, depending on what you want to do to grab those. It's going to be quite a grind. Make sure that anytime you have silver coins in your inventory, so the coin shop, if you have a ton of these silver coins lying around, make sure you're going over to the coin shop and buying as many of these stamina recovery pots as you possibly can, because these stamina pots are going to be what you're using to sort of AFK grind. Find a good team for the gold farm in Fort Solgris, for example, if you don't know. If, like, you're a brand new player, Fort Solgris is where you grind for gold. There is a gold dungeon. You'll basically just get your, your gold dungeon farming team. This is the one that I use specifically. It's a little bit niche, but I will literally just throw on what food? I throw on gold food, and then I will just put it on auto farm and let the thing farm for however long. I'll either let it blow through all of my stamina pots, or you can set it to a specific amount. It really doesn't matter as long as you're farming gold. Always be farming in a game like this. It's kind of like an MMO where you're wanting to constantly be working on something. But other than that, just as you gain Super Awakening coins, or you're doing your demons every day, hopefully, or at least a couple of them. You don't have to do them all. I don't do them all. I'm not going to be a hypocrite and be like, you're not doing all your demons. But, do what you can. Make sure that you're, working on your account, your box and everything. Work on these characters. I'm at the point where there's a lot of really useless, boring characters that I'm never going to use, that I'm sort of working on nowadays, just to sort of like max out the whole box, sort of just getting more GP for my constellations and getting more CC on the characters, just because I'm upgrading them to level 100 and super awakening them and stuff. It's a really, really long grind. Some of it is longer than other pieces, but, there's not a great way to just get like a ton of specific resources at one time, so it's all going to kind of come together as you sort of play the game, of course. So as you're acquiring new characters and stuff like that, that's where a lot of your just box CC is going to come from. Just having extra characters to contribute to your box CC is a big thing. The team CC, on the other hand, is like, it's taking into account all of those like box CC buffs and everything, but at the same time, it's also going to take into account your food. Food does contribute to your geared and ungeared PvP, sort of like team CCs and everything, which you don't even have to worry about your PvP CC specifically, like if you're just trying to do like story quests or something like that. Out CCing the enemy sometimes can be like a make or break situation. Going first can make a really big difference. So, I mean, if you have to, throw HP defense sets on characters that you normally would use as DPS, just so that way you can go first in certain scenarios. There's a lot of different things that will go into it. One thing that I think people kind of sleep on, especially in the early stages, which, you might not have the luxury to work on a lot of these characters, is your associated units. They actually do contribute quite a bit. So one of the big things is that a character like this in your little association slot contributes more stats the higher their ultimate level is, which is another factor that is a little bit pay to win, because if you've pulled a lot of that character or whatever, like a lot of RNG as well, you'll get more stats. My LR Escanor, for example, is 6'6", so I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, it gives me 10% basic stats for the hero, which is contributing to my main hero here. So if I were to go to this character, for example, she's not 6'6", so I'm only getting 7% basic stats here. The gear that character has on is contributing, because I'm in geared PvP specifically right now, but this will contribute to basically everything but ungeared. Ungeared just doesn't take any gear stats into account. But, this character, for example, is 6'6", so I get 10% basic stats. There are certain characters like, this Tarmiel, for example. This Tarmiel has a Grace on, which this Grace is basically like a second passive that just gets applied to the character because he is the associated slot. So you can see the little Grace symbol right here. Deanne is basically gaining this passive Grace right here just for him being the associated unit on the character. That is by far worth more than the stats that the character would typically give. So if the character needs, this kind of Grace, like this is my tank character for this team, she's the one that's going to be taking a lot of the damage. This Grace specifically gives me HP back every time I get hit. That's fantastic. That is like right up the, the tank's alley. That's what you want on a tank character. So even if my Tarmiel wasn't 6/6, I would still probably want to put Tarmiel on just so that way I gain that extra effect. You don't typically have to go for a character that's like 100% maxed out. Obviously, that's going to give you the most stats, but sometimes in certain scenarios, like with a Grace, for example, or some newer characters have unities, which are kind of like Graces, but for specific characters, they will, the Grace might be way more worth it and outweigh the cons of not having as many stats as like a specific other character. So that is a big thing. Costumes, of course, go into it as well. Costumes are kind of an annoying part of the game where, it takes... Pulling a character and then buying extra cosmetics for the character takes the same currency that it takes to actually summon in the game, which is, that's kind of a weird thing to sort of weigh. Sometimes I'm like, all right, well, I would much rather summon for new characters than buy costumes for old characters, which, just depends on how much use you're going to get out of them. But you can only equip 5 of these cosmetics per section. So I can have 5 outfits, 5 weapons, and 5 cosmetics equipped to one specific character at a time. Some characters share cosmetics if they use like the same base template sort of thing. So this Meliodas, for example, and then there's another Lost Vein Meliodas in my box as well that uses the same stuff. So there's this blue Lost Vein. He uses the exact same costumes as the red one. So luckily I can kind of mix and match and share the cosmetics, and when I upgrade them and stuff, they get to use the same stuff. So if I'm inherently upgrading the red one because he's the better one, even though I might not care that much about the stats and stuff on my blue Meliodas, he's actually benefiting from me upgrading the red one as well, just because they share cosmetics. Not every character is going to. Not every single one of these Meliodases use the same cosmetics. I think these 4 use the same, these 2 use the same, these 3 use the same, and all 3 of these last ones use separate cosmetics. So some of them you get more value out of them than others, but it just really depends. If they're festival level characters like some of these are, buying the cosmetics is probably very beneficial because, their festival characters typically are very, very strong in general. So there's a lot of different stuff that goes into it. I could literally sit here and talk about it for like an hour if I wanted to, but it's just, it's a small, sort of slow, gradual grind that you sort of work on. Set goals for yourself, of course. Like whenever I was working on my box, I started at just getting every character to level 60. Then I got every character to level 70. And, I was just sort of working on a goal. I would grind red demons all day long until I got, from 60 to 70, and then I would grind a bunch of gray demons and blah, blah, blah. And now I'm at the point where every character in my box is level 90, and I'm working on them, like getting them all to level 100. And it's just, it takes a lot of time. I've been playing the game for 4 years. I've been playing since day 1 of the global release, and I'm still not done. They're constantly adding new things to work on and everything. You're probably never going to get completely caught up by the time they add some new thing that you need to work on. But that's technically a good thing. I don't want to be caught up because then I'm going to be bored and I'm not going to want to play the game anymore. So personal mentality, I guess, on that one. But either way, it's a lot to work on. It just, honestly, first and foremost, just build gear. Building gear for your characters is the easiest way to sort of just get easy CC on some of these units. So during festivals and stuff like that, during festivals like this that we're doing right now, they will give out some free equipment and stuff like that sometimes. This is like free SR gear that is completely maxed out base and substat rolls. You can just grab those. They give them to you in a little box that already has them formatted like this. It gives you all 6 pieces in one box. Just throw that on a character that you're not using in the box. It'll just sit on that character, give you more combat class, and contribute to your box CC, which eventually turns into more box CC buffs as you sort of reach different milestones. So that is kind of one of the big things. Obviously, as you gain hammers and anvils, work on sets for your characters that you're using, max those characters out. Obviously, like characters that I use a lot, I want to make sure that their gear is worked on. I think, I have 15% rolls on most of this stuff, the attack and HP pieces, it looks like. But, I could come back through and I could hammer all of these pieces that don't have all of their substats maxed out and stuff, just to get that little bit of extra combat class towards it, so that way my number is higher. I can maybe go first if I'm, like, using a PvP or whatever the case may be. There's just a lot. So if you have any other tips or tricks or anything like that you want to, contribute to newer players, feel free to leave it down in the comments below. I'm sure somebody will find it helpful, but that is pretty much it for me. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm more than happy to give you any knowledge that I have. I mean, I might not be the go-to guy. I don't know every single thing about this game, but you know, I've been playing for a while. I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of how most of the systems and stuff work. So that is basically it. That is how you can sort of slowly grind your way to higher combat class on your teams and characters, and it just it's a lot. So thanks for watching. Feel free to subscribe if you're new or anything like that, and I will see you guys later.